everyone, PushingUpRoses here, and today we're going to talk about Now, I know that there are many banned and censored games out there. I'd like to avoid the obvious choices and focus more on adventure games and interactive fiction games, because people don't really think about those genres when you think about banning or censorship, but I've found plenty to talk about. Let's start with one of the most controversial games from the 1990s, Night Trap, a survival horror FMV game. Scandalous. Night Trap is an FMV game with choose-your-own-adventure choice-making elements. Alongside Doom, Lethal Enforcers, and Mortal Kombat, Night Trap was a crucial part in the congressional hearings in the early 1990s that eventually led to the development and implementation of the ESRB rating system.
Shame on people that produce that trash. It's child abuse in my judgment.
It's pretty crazy that Night Trap got glommed in with such blatantly gory and violent video games. The game itself is rather tame compared to other titles that were out at the time, but in December of 1993, Night Trap was removed from the shelves of several retail stores in response to the hearings on video game violence. So what was so offensive about the game? Well, there's a now infamous scene where a girl in a pink nightgown gets taken away by one of the bad guys in the game. People found this insanely offensive, and suddenly people were trying to state that the object of the game was to rape and attack women, even though the game is about saving women from the bad guys. The game does not depict any nudity, violence, or even an ounce of blood.
It's not violent, it's not gory, it's not anything like that at all. And the object of the game is to save the girls that go in to the slumber party.
Way to go, Control! I knew you could do it!
The game even punishes you if you don't save the girls.
I put the lives of those girls in your hands, and you screwed up. I'm pulling the plug on you before you do any more damage.
How this game got thrown into a whirlwind of controversy alongside games that actually are gory and actually do depict violence is very bizarre. The only answer that seems to make sense is the fact that the game came out for the Sega CD, and perhaps the box art misrepresented the game since it featured a rather busty young woman on the cover. This image doesn't quite give an accurate portrayal of the game. With the cover art, the affiliation to the Genesis, a console that was generally thought of as being targeted towards kids, and the misunderstandings about the game's alleged violence and nudity, Congress panicked and false claims were spread. And because this is one of the first FMV games out there that explicitly showed human interaction, perhaps audiences just didn't know what to make of it.
It was so new, it was so revolutionary at the time that it first came out, that it was ideal fodder for somebody who wanted to use it as a political hand grenade.
Sega obviously didn't want Night Trap affiliated with the same console you can play Sonic the Hedgehog on. This uproar eventually led to assigning age and content ratings to video games.
At the end of the hearings, I walked up to Lieberman and I said to him, "Senator, have you ever actually played this game?" And he said, "I don't have to. This is filth."
I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is a rather harrowing adventure game based on the short story by Harlan Ellison. I actually talked about the game in its entirety in a review I did several months back, but what I didn't mention was the fact that there's an entire section taken out of the German and French versions. In this game you play as several different characters. In one of the chapters you play as a German man named Nimdok. In this section you're essentially playing through a part of the Holocaust.
A youth with 1945 stamped beneath. There is something familiar about this.
Even though the word Nazi is not blatantly said, there's Nazi imagery throughout the area you play in, and the game also features Dr. Mengele, a real-life physician who experimented on children during World War II.
Today's procedure requires the removal of the lower section of the subject's spinal cord. You and Dr. Mengele will process the spinal fluid from this and the other adolescent subjects. The fluid will then be used to formulate the serum.
In Germany, any kind of Nazi symbolism or references are taboo, and games that feature such things are either banned or censored. For example, you're not going to see any Wolfenstein in Germany. I Have No Mouth was not completely banned though. It was only Nimdok's section that was removed from the game, which is really rather unfortunate because Nimdok is actually essential for beating the game. So yeah, kind of a problem.
I smell burnt flesh, but this is obviously not a kitchen.
So when you think about banned and censored games, LucasArts games generally don't pop up. They're fairly inoffensive and harmless, with enjoyable humor and less infuriating inventory puzzles than other adventure games. And in most titles, there isn't a way to die or get yourself in an unwinnable situation. No reason for censorship. Such is not the case for Maniac Mansion, an adventure game that was released on several platforms including the Commodore 64, the Apple II, the IBM PC, the Amiga, the Atari ST, and finally the Nintendo Entertainment System. The company submitted the game to Nintendo in 1990. A month after it was submitted, Nintendo of America sent Lucasfilms a report outlining parts of the game they felt were too graphic. Among the things that were omitted from the NES version are this nude statue, Playboy-esque calendars, a picture of a mummy in a pinup pose, and several lines of text that Nintendo deemed too profane. This includes the word kill and the word sucks. There's actually a line from one of the cutscenes that reads, "Getting your pretty brains sucked out," which was changed to "getting your pretty brains removed." I guess the term sucked out was far too inappropriate for Nintendo. A lot of Edna's lines were also altered. In the PC version, she is kind of a nymphomaniac and is quite taken by the main character. In the NES version, she's rather bland. There was also a little issue with the end of the game. In the credits, it said NES Scum. Clearly, the censors didn't understand that Scum was the name of the game engine.
Are you calling us, the mighty Nintendo gods, scum?
No, it's the name of our game engine?
Such insolence! What will people think? Remove it immediately!
No matter what the reason, NES Scum was begrudgingly removed from the credits. Alright, the minute you find Harvester or even read anything about it, you will know that this game was marketed to be completely offensive. The creators of the game stated that there was something offensive in it for everyone. Looking back at this FMV game, it's easy to write off the gore and violence as looking, well, just a little cheesy. But the creators obviously wanted to push people's buttons. You play as character Steve Mason, who awakens in what seems to be the 1950s. The game includes everything from cannibalism to sexism to disturbing suicide scenes to very violent and gory fight scenes.
You don't know the half of it.
There's also a lot of sexual references and even a sex scene, which, if you ask me, isn't very sexy at all. See how she looks away to the side with utter disinterest? That is what I call not selling it. Harvester is absolutely too insane not to play and may be enjoyed ironically by some people, but Germany was not having any of it. It was banned there for all of the graphic elements I mentioned above, and it was heavily censored in the UK. The game was never even submitted to Australia because the producers knew it would get shot down, which is understandable. Australia has a long list of banned games, especially ones that depict violent behavior. If they had attempted, I imagine it would have gone down something like, "Aye mate, won't you take our game, aye?" And they were all like, "Nah, it's too violent, mate, put another shrimp on the barbie." If you like things that are laughably bad, yet still have the power to make you squeamish, check out Harvester. The completely uncensored version can be purchased on GOG. Dreamweb is a top contender, alongside I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, for the most demoralizing game ever made, but lovers of it will stand by it as an engrossing game with a decent storyline. Dreamweb is a cyberpunk adventure game with a point-and-click interface. The game looks cartoonish, but for some reason, the violence and dark atmosphere are so much more hard-hitting than, let's say, a gory FMV game, or even games like Mortal Kombat or Grand Theft Auto, where death scenes are so completely embellished and so not grounded in reality, I can't take them too seriously. It's almost comical. But Dreamweb has this sense of reality about it, a different sense of darkness, and even though I know it's not real, the gruesome parts of the game really do strike me on a more visceral level, much more so than other games. The death scene animations are very fluid, and the top-down perspective makes the player feel like they are actually witnessing a murder. The game was quick to be banned in Australia, like a lot of games that featured violence and nudity. You may be asking why Australia is so square when it comes to video games, and it's likely because Australia didn't have an R or 18+ rating system until 2013. The scene that got the game banned depicted two nude characters having sex, and even shows a little full-frontal male nudity. I can't even think of another game that isn't a porn title that has male nudity so early on in gaming. And no, Custer's Revenge does not count. The interesting thing about censorship in Dreamweb is that it wasn't targeted for its gory and absurdly violent aspects. The sex scene and the nudity seemed to be the main reasons why feathers were ruffled. And yet there seemed to be very little problem with characters getting gunned down, hit by vehicles, or even being killed in explosions.
I have to kill you all.
Then kill me, you bastard! End this pain!
The whole concept of violence being A-okay and sex being an absolute no-no is a little backwards in my mind. Personally, I'd rather see some private parts versus somebody getting their torso blown off. But I guess the censors didn't see it quite the same way. In 1995, Dreamweb was refused classification, but after some minor changes like putting clothing on the characters, it was approved. Dreamweb is now being offered as freeware, so if you're in the mood for a very interesting yet very depressing game, I would definitely give it a go. And to end this video, I just have one thing to say. Fuck censorship.